So in 1931, there's this guy, Clarence Hughes, and he goes to the dentist with just a terrible toothache.
Right, just radiating pain.
Exactly. So the dentist puts him under, and historical records call this a rather crude anesthesia.
Which is terrifying in itself.
Yeah, totally. They just wanted to ease the agony so the guy could take a proper look. But when Clarence wakes up hours later, he finds out he is missing 16 teeth.
Wow.
Yeah. And for some inexplicable reason, his tonsils had also been removed.
Just completely without permission.
None of it was consented to. Zero. And the kicker is, a week later, Clarence actually died from complications related to that massive, unconsented surgery.
It's just an awful, awful tragedy.
It is. But today we're going to explain exactly what that tragic 1930s dental visit has to do with how you manage your own money, your retirement accounts, and really your financial peace of mind. Welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here. Because, the parallel there is actually profound.
It really is.
The core issue in that historical story is the exact same issue plaguing the modern financial world. It's the catastrophic danger of an expert assuming they know what is best for you without ever bothering to ask what you actually want or, what you can even tolerate.
And that is exactly the tension we are diving into today. We are pulling apart a really incredible piece of source material, specifically Chapter 19, which acts as this psychological capstone to everything we understand about personal finance.
Yeah, it ties everything together.
It does. We're setting aside the dry, sterile spreadsheets today. We are not going to debate the mathematical superiority of a Roth IRA over a traditional 401k.
Thank goodness.
Right. We're looking directly at the human mind. We're exploring the mechanics of ego, the hidden costs of financial survival, and the deeply personal nature of risk.
Which is the stuff that actually matters.
Exactly. Our mission today is to extract the universal psychological frameworks from this text so you can make decisions that actually serve your life, rather than just serving a calculator.
And that is vital, because
Yeah.
the vast majority of financial literature operates in this weird vacuum. It assumes that human beings are perfectly rational, emotionless algorithms that, only care about maximizing numerical returns on a spreadsheet.
It reads like a stereo manual. Like, input X amount of dollars at Y interest rate, and you will output Z wealth at age 65.
Right, but human beings don't live on spreadsheets.
No, we definitely do not.
We live messy, chaotic lives. We're driven by fear, status anxiety, constantly changing goals, and, completely unpredictable macroeconomic environments.
Yeah, the world happens.
Exactly. And this source material brilliantly forces us to move from the theory of finance, which is clean and mathematical, into the highly personalized application of it, which is inherently murky.
Super murky. And that actually brings us back to poor Clarence Hughes in 1931.
Right, let's unpack that legal fallout.
Yeah, let's look closer at that case, because the medical tragedy is obviously awful, but the legal fallout is what actually sets up our entire financial framework today.
It's fascinating.
So Clarence's wife obviously sued the dentist.
As she should.
Right. But she didn't sue for medical malpractice or wrongful death in the way we think of it today, because in the 1930s, the brutal reality was that dying from surgical complications or infections was just a widely known and accepted risk.
Yeah, they didn't have the robust antibiotics we rely on now.
Exactly. So she sued specifically for the lack of consent.
Right.
She argued that the dentist had stripped her husband of his bodily autonomy, and that if Clarence had been woken up and asked if he wanted 16 teeth and his tonsils removed in one go, he would have obviously said no.
Yeah, who wouldn't?
Right. Yet the courts ruled against her. The case went nowhere.
Which just sounds insane today.
It does, and the rationale from the court is chilling. They essentially stated that doctors required the absolute freedom to make the best medical decisions without interference from the patient.
Wow.
One judge even noted that without granting doctors that total authority, society could not enjoy the, quote, advancement of science.
So you're basically sacrificing individual autonomy on the altar of theoretical medical progress.
Exactly. It sounds completely barbaric to modern ears.
It really does. But to understand it, the source material points us to Dr. J. Katz.
Oh, right. The guy who wrote that landmark book.
Yes, The Silent World Between Doctor and Patient.
Yeah.
Katz unpacked the medical ethos of that era. And, it wasn't born out of doctors wanting to be malicious mad scientists.
Right. They weren't trying to be evil.
Not at all. It was built on two very deeply held fundamental assumptions.
Okay, what were they?
First, they assumed that every single patient universally wants to be cured.
That seems logical on the surface.
Right. And second, they assume there is a universal, objective, mathematically right way to cure them.
Ah, I see the trap there.
Exactly. If you accept those two assumptions as absolute laws of physics, then asking the patient for their opinion is a total waste of time.
Right, like if there's only one destination and only one road to get there, why would the driver ask the passenger for directions?
That's a great way to put it. The doctor felt a moral obligation to fix the physical machine of the body using their superior knowledge.
And the patient's emotional state or personal preferences were just mathematically irrelevant.
Irrelevant.
Yeah.
But as Katz points out, and as the medical field eventually realized over the last 50 years, those assumptions are totally flawed because human beings are complex.
Right.
We shifted away from a treating disease model to a treating patients model.
Which makes a huge difference.
A massive difference. A doctor today doesn't just dictate a procedure. They lay out the options.
They give you the pros and cons.
Right. They explain the mechanics of treatment A, which, might have a higher survival rate but comes with debilitating nausea,
Yeah.
versus treatment B, which has a slightly lower survival rate but preserves a higher quality of daily life.
Because the definition of what is actually worth it varies wildly from person to person.
Completely.
Like an 80-year-old might choose quality of life over aggressive treatment, while a 30-year-old might tolerate any amount of suffering for a chance at a cure.
Right. The doctor knows the statistical odds, but only the patient knows their own pain tolerance.
And that is the crux of Katz's argument. Medicine is a complex profession, and the interactions between physicians and patients are equally complex.
You cannot rely solely on the benevolent mathematical intentions of the doctor.
No, you can't. And this is exactly where the text bridges the gap between 1930s dentistry and modern personal finance.
Yes. Let's make that connection concrete for everyone listening.
Okay, let's do it.
Imagine sitting down with a financial advisor today.
All right, I'm at the desk.
You walk into their office, and before you could even open your mouth to talk about, say, your aging parents or your fear of market crashes or your dream of starting a bakery.
They just slide a binder across the desk.
Exactly. They aggressively push a perfect 80-20 equity to bond portfolio on you.
Right, because it's the optimal model.
They show you the historical charts, proving that mathematically this specific allocation yields the highest long-term returns.
Okay, but if that advisor doesn't ask you what you actually want out of life, they are behaving exactly like that 1930s dentist.
Spot on. They're pulling your financial teeth without asking.
Wow, yeah.
They are assuming that because a strategy is historically and mathematically optimal, it is just automatically the correct choice for you.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here. Let's look at the math on that.
Sure.
If a portfolio yields an 8% average return historically, and a more conservative one only yields like 4%, isn't the 8% portfolio objectively better?
Mathematically, yes.
Right. So why does it matter what my emotional goals are if the math is just math?
Because the math assumes perfect behavioral compliance.
What do you mean by that?
Well, a portfolio might average an 8% return over 30 years. But to get that average, you have to endure periods where the portfolio drops by 30% or 40%.
Oh, right. The volatility?
Exactly. So if you are a naturally anxious person and that advisor forces you into that mathematically perfect aggressive portfolio, what happens when the market crashes?
I panic.
Yep.
I log into my account, I see my life savings cut in half, and I sell everything just to stop the bleeding.
And in doing so, you turn a temporary market fluctuation into a permanent catastrophic loss.
Wow. So the math was right, but because the strategy didn't align with my emotional pain tolerance, it actually resulted in financial ruin.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is why the source material establishes a remarkably humble thesis for financial advice.
Which is?
I can't tell you what to do with your money because I don't know you.
That is such a powerful statement. I can't tell you what to do with your money because I don't know you.
It's an admission that universal financial advice is just an illusion.
Yeah. I mean, experts and advisors are incredibly valuable. Just like modern doctors, they understand the universal mechanics of compounding, the historical odds of inflation, tax optimization.
But the application of those universal truths is inextricably personal.
Right. What is brilliant for a 25-year-old tech worker with a massive risk appetite will literally bankrupt a 65-year-old retiree on a fixed income.
The odds are universal, but the application is deeply personal. And since no author, no deep dive, and no generic article can look at the specific messy details of your life,
You have to become your own financial physician,
you do. You have to learn how to diagnose your own psychology.
which means we have to start by looking inward.
Right.
If we strip away the universal spreadsheets, the first psychological hurdle the text demands we confront is how we view our own success and how we view the possessions of others.
This is where it gets uncomfortable.
Yeah, it really does. We have to talk about the brutal battle between ego and wealth.
And we constantly conflate those two concepts in modern society. We use the words interchangeably.
All the time.
But the source material draws a sharp, almost uncomfortable distinction between them. It defines saving money in a way that shifts the entire paradigm.
I love this definition.
It states that saving money is simply the gap between your ego and your income.
The gap between your ego and your income. Let's break down the mechanics of that because it exposes the trap of the hedonic treadmill so perfectly.
Yeah, let's look at an example.
Okay, let's say you get a major promotion. Your income goes up by, say, $30,000 a year.
Awesome.
Right. Mathematically, your ability to save just increased drastically.
Huge increase.
But if your ego immediately demands that you lease a luxury car, upgrade your wardrobe, and move into a more expensive apartment to signal to your peers that you got a promotion.
Your savings rate remains exactly zero.
Exactly zero. Your ego grew at the exact same velocity as your income, consuming every new dollar.
You haven't actually improved your financial security or your future autonomy at all. You've simply inflated your lifestyle overhead.
Yeah. And this ties directly into the text's definition of wealth. The author argues that wealth is what you don't see.
Which feels entirely backwards to how we are wired, right?
Totally backwards. When you walk down the street and see someone driving a brand new Ferrari, wearing a Rolex, carrying designer bags, your brain immediately categorizes them as wealthy.
Because you're looking directly at the evidence.
Right, but you're actually looking at evidence of money that has been spent.
Exactly. You are looking at the literal opposite of wealth.
That's such a mind-bending way to look at it.
If someone buys a $300,000 Ferrari, the only thing you know for absolute certain about their finances is that they have $300,000 less in the bank today than they did yesterday.
Or they're carrying $300,000 more in high-interest debt.
Right. The text argues that true wealth is the money that has not been spent.
It's the unbought car.
The unpurchased watch.
The downgraded vacation.
Because unspent money represents options. It represents flexibility.
Yeah, wealth is the invisible, unallocated capital that gives you the power to make choices in the future. The visible things, the cars and houses, are just the artifacts of depleted wealth.
And this brings us to a psychological phenomena the text calls the paradox of admiration.
Whoa, this part is brilliant.
The advice the author gives here is wonderfully blunt. Just be nicer and less flashy.
Huh. If only it were that easy.
Right, because we fall into this trap of believing that signaling our success will make people love us. You think, if I buy this massive house, my friends will come over and think I'm incredibly smart and successful.
But what is the actual mechanism happening in the minds of the people looking at your stuff?
The mechanism is projection. When you drive down the street in a wildly expensive car, you think everyone is staring at you with admiration.
Right, you think you're the star of the movie.
But the text accurately points out that nobody is looking at the driver.
No.
The people on the sidewalk are looking at the car, and they are imagining themselves in the driver's seat.
Oh, that's so true.
They're imagining how much respect they would get if they owned it. The driver is completely erased from the equation.
You are literally using your money to buy a prop, and the audience is just using that prop to fuel their own fantasies.
Exactly. It's a complete failure to achieve the respect you're actually trying to buy.
Because what we fundamentally crave isn't horsepower and chrome.
No.
We crave respect, validation, and admiration. We think the luxury items are a shortcut to acquiring those emotional needs.
But the source material argues that humility, kindness, and empathy generate far more genuine respect than any physical possession ever could.
I understand the logic there, I really do, but it's incredibly hard to practice.
Oh, extremely hard.
We are fighting millions of years of evolutionary biology that screams at us to signal our status to the tribe.
Yeah, we want to look like the apex predator.
Right. Trying to buy respect with a flashy car feels a bit like trying to buy a healthy cardiovascular system by just purchasing expensive running shoes.
That is a great analogy.
You are buying the visible symbol of the identity, the shoes, while completely avoiding the invisible, grueling work of actually running miles every morning.
Right.
In finance, you want the identity of success without the invisible restraint of living below your means. So if society is bombarding us with status signals constantly, how do we actually mechanically suppress the ego?
Well, the text provides a very practical psychological tool for this.
Huh.
You must deeply internalize the mechanics of luck and risk.
Luck and risk.
Yes. We tend to view outcomes in life as a simple equation, right? Effort equals results.
Sure, the old pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality.
Exactly. But the world is infinitely too complex for outcomes to be purely dictated by individual agency.
Meaning, nobody is entirely self-made.
Absolutely nobody. Let's look at the mechanics of luck for a second.
Okay.
Imagine two highly motivated, brilliant entrepreneurs. They both start identical businesses, working 80-hour weeks, taking the exact same calculated risks.
Everything is exactly the same on paper.
Right. Entrepreneur A launches in 2010, right at the beginning of a historic decade-long bull market. Capital is cheap, consumers have disposable income, and the business explodes into a billion-dollar empire.
Okay, and entrepreneur B.
Entrepreneur B launches the exact same model in late 2019. 6 months later, a global pandemic shuts down the world economy, supply chains freeze, and the business goes bankrupt.
Wow. So entrepreneur A isn't a genius and entrepreneur B isn't a fool.
Exactly.
They just experienced opposite ends of the macroeconomic spectrum.
Right. When you recognize that luck and risk are tangible, measurable forces that push and pull every single outcome, it fundamentally changes how you view yourself and others.
It has to.
Acknowledging the role of luck strips away your ego when you succeed. You realize you had a tailwind you didn't create.
Yeah.
And acknowledging the role of risk fosters immense compassion when you or others fail. It stops you from judging people based entirely on their visible financial outcomes.
It grounds you in reality. If you accept that you can't control luck, you stop trying to engineer it through flashy displays of dominance.
Exactly.
You shift your focus entirely to the inputs you can control.
Yeah.
Your savings rate, your emotional regulation, and your ego.
It also revolutionizes how you select your role models.
How so?
Well, if you believe effort equals outcome, you will idolize the billionaire who took a massive, reckless gamble that happened to pay off purely through luck.
Right.
You will try to emulate their strategy, and you will likely be destroyed by risk. But if you understand luck, you stop idolizing the extreme outliers. You start studying people who have built robust, resilient systems that can actually survive bad luck.
So if we are throwing out the old scorecards, we aren't trying to impress pedestrians with a Ferrari, and we aren't trying to emulate lucky billionaires. What is the actual metric for success?
That's the million-dollar question.
If the goal of money isn't to buy visible status, what are we actually optimizing for?
This brings us to one of the most radical paradigm shifts in the source material. We have to completely redefine the concept of a return.
The ultimate financial guidepost. And the text defines it with a phrase that has absolutely zero numbers in it.
Right. Manage your money in a way that helps you sleep at night.
Manage your money in a way that helps you sleep at night. That completely upends traditional financial theory.
It really does. Because traditionally, the metrics of success are entirely mathematical. The goal is to maximize the percentage yield on your capital.
Right. You run a Monte Carlo simulation. You find the portfolio that historically returns 9.2% instead of 8.9%. And you declare victory.
But the text argues that maximizing your mathematical returns is a catastrophic failure if the mechanical cost of that return is chronic insomnia.
Oh, absolutely.
If your aggressive options trading strategy requires you to stare at your ceiling at 3 a.m., heart pounding, sweating through your sheets because the Asian markets are opening down,
Yeah.
then your money is actively degrading your quality of life.
Yeah. Even if the spreadsheet says you are winning, your biology says you are failing.
The purpose of money is to solve problems, not create new physiological ones. Establishing, does this help me sleep at night, as your primary metric forces you to integrate your unique psychological profile right into your financial architecture.
Okay, now, if we are shifting our focus away from obsessing over maximum yield percentages, what lever do we pull to actually grow our wealth?
Right.
If I'm not supposed to spend all day trying to pick the perfect stock that will jump 20% next month, how do I actually advance?
Utilize the mechanical power of time.
Time.
The text explicitly states that extending your time horizon is the single most powerful thing you can do as an investor. Time is the supreme force in finance.
Let's break down the mechanics of that, because compounding is magic is this cliche that people just nod at without actually understanding how the snowball rolls.
Yeah, they really don't. And the mathematics of compounding are notoriously difficult for the human brain to intuitively grasp because we think linearly, not exponentially.
Give me an example.
Well, if you ask someone what 8 plus 8 plus 8 is, they easily calculate 24.
Simple addition.
But if you ask them what 8 times 8 times 8 is, the brain struggles to jump to 512. Compounding relies on exponential growth, where your money generates earnings, and then those earnings generate their own earnings.
Right. And the classic example here is always Warren Buffett.
Oh, always.
People obsess over how he picks stocks. But the actual mechanical secret to his wealth is that he has been investing for 3/4 of a century.
Exactly.
Something like 95% of his net worth came after his 65th birthday.
That stat always blows my mind.
Right. Not because he suddenly got better at picking stocks in his old age, but because the snowball of his capital had been rolling down a very long hill for 60 years. The base of the snowball was so massive that even a tiny percentage rotation added billions in volume.
And beyond the sheer math of compounding, expanding your time horizon dilutes the impact of luck and risk.
How does time do that?
Well, if your time horizon is 1 year, your return is entirely at the mercy of luck. You might invest right before a historic geopolitical crisis tanks the market by 30%.
Yeah.
Look like a fool and you lose money. But if your time horizon is 30 years, that massive 1-year drop becomes a tiny, barely noticeable blip on a long upward curve.
So time doesn't eliminate risk, but it smooths out the variance.
Exactly. It pushes your long-term results closer to what your underlying strategy actually deserves.
So if we use time to grow the wealth quietly in the background without losing sleep, what is the ultimate payoff?
Right.
The text argues that the highest dividend you can ever receive in finance is not a cash payout from a stock.
No, it's not.
The highest dividend is using your money to gain absolute control over your time.
The ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want.
That's the dream.
It is. The author views a lack of autonomy as a universal drag on human happiness. If you are wealthy, but you have no control over your calendar, like if your boss can demand you fly across the country on your child's birthday, you are not truly wealthy.
No, you're just highly paid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Therefore, systematically buying back your autonomy is the highest possible return on your capital.
I see where you're going, but I want to push back on this framework a bit.
Bring it on.
Let's really stress test this sleep at night metric against the cold reality of the global economy.
Okay.
Let's say I am a deeply anxious person. The absolute only way I sleep at night without having a panic attack is if I liquidate my entire portfolio, take all the cash, and literally bury it in a fireproof safe in my backyard.
Okay, extreme, but okay.
Right. I know it's not in the volatile stock market. I sleep beautifully. But mechanically, that is a guaranteed loss. Inflation is going to eat that money alive. If I bury $100,000 today, in a decade it might only buy $70,000 worth of groceries. I am mathematically guaranteeing my own impoverishment.
You are.
So how is financial ruin a fair trade for a good night's sleep?
That is the ultimate tension, and it's a brilliant challenge. But if we adhere to the source materials philosophy, to each their own, we have to look at the behavioral mechanics of the alternative.
Walk me through that.
Okay, the macroeconomic reality of inflation is undeniable. You're guaranteed to lose purchasing power if you hold cash. That is a fact.
Right.
But what happens if we force that highly anxious person into the stock market because we tell them it's mathematically necessary to beat inflation?
They invest.
They invest their $100,000. 3 months later, the market corrects by 15%. Their portfolio drops to $85,000.
And because they are highly anxious and have no risk tolerance, their psychology shatters.
Exactly. They panic. They sell everything at the absolute bottom just to stop the pain. And they put that $85,000 back in the safe.
Ah, wow. So by trying to optimize for inflation, they triggered a behavioral error that instantly wiped out 15% of their capital.
Exactly. They suffered a massive permanent loss. Plus, they endured 3 months of sheer psychological torture.
Jeez.
By keeping the money in the safe from day one, yes, they pay the hidden, agonizing tax of inflation. Their purchasing power slowly bleeds out over decades.
Yeah.
But that slow bleed is the lesser of two evils for their specific psychology. It prevents the catastrophic behavioral mistake of panic selling at the bottom.
That makes total sense.
As long as they fully understand the mechanical cost of inflation, choosing to absorb that cost in exchange for daily mental stability is a perfectly valid, rational choice for them.
Wow. So psychological survival trumps mathematical optimization every single time because bad psychology will eventually sabotage the math anyway.
Precisely. Which leads us to the reality that whether you are investing aggressively or hiding cash in a safe, you are going to experience loss. The future is turbulent.
It is. So we have to talk about the psychology of losing and how the text advises we mentally process failure.
This brings us to Section 4. And the text starts with a concept that feels incredibly counterintuitive. You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune.
Which goes against everything we're taught.
Right, because we are conditioned by the traditional education system to view failure symmetrically. If you take a history test with 100 questions and you get 50 of them wrong, you get an F.
You fail the class.
Exactly. And we carry that symmetric view of failure into our financial and professional lives, assuming that we need to be right 90% of the time to succeed.
But the text points out that finance, business, and investing are not symmetric. They operate on a tail-driven model.
Tail-driven.
Right. The vast majority of outcomes are driven by a tiny minority of events.
We can look at the mechanics of index funds to understand this. If you buy a broad index fund that holds 500 companies, you might assume you need all 500 to perform well. In reality, the mathematics of the market dictate that hundreds of those companies will completely stagnate and dozens will outright go bankrupt.
Yeah.
But a tiny handful of them, maybe 5 or 6 companies, will experience exponential, explosive growth. The massive gains of those tail-end winners more than cover the losses of the hundreds of losers.
The same mechanism applies to venture capital. A firm invests in 50 startups. 49 of them fail completely, taking millions of dollars down the drain.
Right.
But the 50th startup becomes the next Amazon. That one tail event pays for all the failures and generates billions in profit. The firm was wrong 98% of the time, and they still made a fortune.
Therefore, the text argues that you must evaluate your financial life by looking at the entire portfolio of your decisions over a lifetime, rather than agonizing over individual failures.
Because if you scrutinize every single investment or career move in isolation, you will artificially inflate the brilliance of your winners.
Making you dangerously overconfident.
Right. And you will artificially inflate the regret of your losers, making you paralyzed by fear.
You have to accept that a high frequency of failure is just the mechanical reality of participating in a complex system.
So if failure and loss are normal, how do we biologically process them without panicking?
Well, the text gives us a profound linguistic reframe. We need to distinguish between fees and fines.
Fees versus fines.
The premise here is that success in finance has a massive cost. But that cost doesn't come with a visible price tag.
Yeah, when you buy a house, the cost is clear. A down payment and a mortgage. But when you invest for 30 years to build generational wealth, the cost isn't written on a receipt.
No, it's not.
The text says the currency you pay to the market consists of uncertainty, doubt, volatility, and regret. That emotional distress is the price of admission.
But how you categorize that distress in your brain determines whether you survive it. Are you paying a fine or are you paying a fee?
Let me use an analogy here to paint the picture.
Go for it.
Think about driving down the highway and getting pulled over for speeding. The police officer hands you a $200 ticket. That is a fine. You broke the rules, you endangered others, and you are being financially punished.
Right.
What is the psychological response to a fine?
It's guilt, regret, and an immediate desire to alter your behavior so you never have to pay that fine again.
Right, you slow down. Now imagine you go to an incredible, massive amusement park. You pay $200 at the gate. You go inside, you ride the most intense roller coasters, you get thrown around, your stomach drops, you wait in long, exhausting lines.
It sounds like a typical summer day.
Exactly. And by the end of the day, you are slightly nauseous and completely drained. Do you view that nausea and the $200 as a fine? Did you do something wrong?
No, you view it as a fee. It's the inherent price of admission for the thrill of the ride. You don't enjoy the nausea, but you accept it as part of the experience.
That is exactly how the text argues we should view market volatility. When the market drops 20% and your portfolio bleeds, human nature urges you to view that emotional pain and temporary loss of capital as a fine.
You think, I made a mistake. I'm bad at investing. The market is punishing me.
Right. And because you treat it like a fine, you change your behavior to avoid it. You pull your money out.
And you lock in the loss.
Yeah.
But if you mentally reframe that 20% drop as a fee, a necessary, unavoidable price you have to pay to get the historical long-term returns of the market, it changes everything.
It changes the whole paradigm.
You don't enjoy watching your net worth shrink. You don't enjoy the nausea of the roller coaster, but you don't panic. You accept the fee, you stay in your seat, and you wait for the ride to finish.
But to survive that roller coaster, you need a lap bar. You need a safety mechanism so you don't get thrown out of the car. And the text calls this safety mechanism room for error.
I love the specific wording the author uses here. We must worship room for error. We shouldn't just appreciate it, we should revere it.
Room for error is defined mechanically as the gap between what you predict will happen in the future and what you actually need to happen in order to survive financially.
Like civil engineering.
Yeah, let's talk about the bridge.
Right. If an engineer is building a bridge and they calculate that the absolute heaviest commercial truck that will ever cross it weighs 10 tons, they do not build the bridge to hold exactly 10 tons.
Because if they did, a 10-ton truck combined with a heavy gust of wind shear would collapse the structure.
Exactly. They build the bridge to hold 50 tons. That 40-ton gap is the room for error. It accounts for material fatigue, high winds, and unpredictable traffic jams.
And in personal finance, building a 50-ton bridge means maintaining robust cash reserves, having a flexible timeline for your goals, and living on less than you earn.
Because if your entire financial survival requires the market to return exactly 8% every single year, and requires you to never get sick, and requires your company to never lay you off, you have built a 10-ton bridge.
The very first unexpected gust of wind, a medical emergency, or a recession will completely collapse your financial life.
This connects directly to a crucial mechanical distinction the text makes between risk and ruin.
Risk and ruin. We hear the word risk thrown around constantly, but we rarely define its limits.
The text is adamant that you should actively embrace normal risk. Risk is the engine of compounding. You have to endure the volatility of the stock market to grow your wealth. Taking calculated risks pays off over time.
But you must be absolutely obsessively paranoid of ruinous risks.
Yes.
Wait, where is the line? If I invest 20% of my net worth into a single volatile startup company, is that a risk I should embrace for the upside, or is that ruinous?
Well, think about it. If the company goes bankrupt, taking a 20% hit is massive and painful, but it doesn't leave you starving on the street.
Right, I still have 80% of my money.
That is normal risk.
Huh.
It is painful, it is a severe setback, but you survive it. You can rebuild from a 20% loss.
So what's ruinous risk?
Ruinous risk is any decision that has the potential to take your net worth to absolute zero or push you into deep, inescapable debt.
Give me a mechanical example of ruinous risk.
The most common mechanism for ruinous risk is excessive leverage.
Margin trading.
Exactly. Let's say you have $100,000. You use massive margin leverage to borrow another $400,000, and you invest $500,000 into the market.
Sounds great if the market goes up.
Right. If the market goes up 20%, you double your original money. It feels brilliant. But if the market drops just 20%, your broker issues a margin call. They liquidate your holdings to cover the borrowed debt.
And your original $100,000 is completely wiped out. You are at zero.
And the mathematical problem with going to zero is that it permanently ejects you from the game. You no longer have capital to compound.
Even if the market roars back the very next month, you don't benefit because you have no chips left on the table.
Room for error is your defense against ruinous risk. It ensures you always live to play another day.
Exactly. Endurance is the invisible partner of compounding. If you don't have the endurance to stay in the game, the math of compounding cannot work its magic.
Okay, so we've established that the future is turbulent. We know we have to pay emotional fees. We know we need to build 50-ton bridges, and we know we must avoid going to zero at all costs.
But how does the text actually suggest we prepare for a future that is, by biological definition, completely impossible to predict?
This brings us to Section 5, Navigating the Unknown.
Navigating the unknown.
And the source material starts with a piece of advice that sounds almost comically simplistic. Save. Just save.
It does sound simplistic, especially compared to the complex strategies we usually hear.
Yeah, most financial media conditions you to believe that every dollar must have a specific named job. You are taught to save for a down payment, save for a new car, save for a child's college fund.
You earmark everything. You create little buckets in your bank account with labels on them.
But the text argues that saving money for things that are entirely impossible to predict or define is actually the most rational financial strategy you can adopt.
Because life is, as the author beautifully puts it, a continuous chain of surprises.
A continuous chain of surprises. That perfectly encapsulates the reality of adulthood.
If you only build buckets for the emergencies you can imagine, like a broken transmission or a leaky roof, you leave yourself completely exposed to the emergencies you cannot comprehend until they happen.
A global pandemic shutting down your industry.
Right.
A sudden, rare illness that requires you to take a year off work. Saving money without a specific label attached to it acts as a generalized hedge against life's inevitable ability to surprise the hell out of you at the worst possible moment.
I understand the defensive logic of that, but let me put myself in the shoes of someone trying to execute this on a Tuesday night.
Okay.
Human nature is fundamentally wired for dopamine and rewards. We are not evolved to delay gratification for abstract concepts.
That's very true.
It is relatively easy to motivate yourself to skip a costly dinner out when you have a picture of a shiny new car taped to your fridge. You look at the car, you imagine driving it, you get a hit of dopamine, and you happily cook pasta at home.
Because you are trading present sacrifice for a very clear, tangible future reward.
The delayed gratification has a recognizable face. But how do you motivate yourself to sacrifice today, to grind through a difficult work week and not treat yourself for a nebulous, unnamed surprise that might happen 5 years from now?
It's tough.
There is no shiny reward attached to an emergency fund. How do we mechanically override our basic psychology to save for nothing?
That is the core behavioral hurdle. To overcome it, we have to synthesize what we discussed about ego and time.
Walk me through the mechanics of that shift in the brain.
You have to totally decouple the act of saving from the idea of deprivation and link it directly to the purchase of autonomy.
Okay.
If you view saving money merely as punishing myself by not buying the shoes I want, it requires immense depleting willpower, and willpower always runs out eventually.
Right.
But if you reframe the act of saving as an active, aggressive purchase of future freedom, it alters your dopamine structure. When you transfer $500 into a nameless savings account, you aren't getting nothing.
You are actively buying a tiny sliver of independence.
Exactly. You are buying the ability to look a toxic boss in the eye and quit without facing immediate eviction. You are buying the option to take a lower-paying job that you actually love.
The reward isn't a physical object. The reward is the invisible, heavy armor of autonomy.
Once your brain learns to value the feeling of autonomy over the feeling of a new purchase, saving for nothing becomes deeply intrinsically satisfying.
Buying the invisible armor of autonomy, I love that framework. It makes saving an offensive move rather than a defensive retreat.
Yes, and as we navigate this unknown future in our armor, the text issues a major warning.
What's the warning?
We must avoid the extreme ends of financial decisions because of a psychological phenomenon called the end of history illusion.
The end of history illusion.
It's a concept pioneered by psychologists like Dan Gilbert. It describes the deeply ingrained human tendency to recognize that we have changed massively in the past, while simultaneously believing that whoever we are right now is the finished, permanent product.
Oh man, I remember being 22 and absolutely convinced that my ultimate life goal was to live in a loud, chaotic downtown loft above a bar.
Of course.
And I thought I would never, ever want a yard or a quiet street. The idea of living in the suburbs sounded like a prison sentence.
And now?
Now, at 40, the idea of living above a loud bar sounds like actual torture, and I spend my weekends looking at landscaping videos.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You evolved. Your goals, your risk tolerance, and your values shifted. The illusion is believing that at 40, you are finally done changing.
Right.
You will likely be a vastly different person at 60. And the text warns that the more extreme your financial decisions are in the present, the more likely your future self will bitterly regret them.
Give me a mechanical example of this in personal finance.
Look at the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early.
Oh, yeah.
Someone in their 20s discovers this concept and decides to take it to the extreme. They save 80% of their income. They live in a tiny, dilapidated apartment. They never travel. They never go out to dinner.
They eat rice and beans for 10 years to amass $1 million by age 35.
Right. Mathematically, it's impressive.
Sure.
But psychologically, what happens when they hit 35, realize they are deeply isolated, they missed out on the formative experiences of their youth, and they suddenly decide they want to travel and start a family.
They have boxed in their future self with an extreme past decision. They traded their youth for a number on a screen.
Conversely, if someone takes on massive, crushing debt in their 20s to fund an extreme luxury lifestyle, they've forced their 40-year-old self to spend a decade working a miserable job just to pay off the ghosts of their past.
So keeping to the middle path, saving reasonably, spending reasonably preserves options for the person you will eventually become.
It's about maintaining structural flexibility over your lifespan.
And part of maintaining that flexibility is ensuring you are playing your own game. The text says we need to explicitly define the game you're playing and make sure your actions are not being influenced by people playing a different game.
This is perhaps the most critical advice for navigating the modern era of social media,
where we are bombarded with everyone else's financial highlight reels in real time.
Yeah. You open Twitter or a financial news network, and you see a 20-something making massive leveraged bets on a highly volatile cryptocurrency.
Or day trading tech stocks, and they are posting screenshots of 40% gains in an afternoon.
Right. It is almost impossible not to feel a visceral sense of FOMO.
Fear of missing out.
Your brain immediately questions your own strategy. Am I an idiot for putting money in a boring index fund? Should I be doing what they are doing?
What your brain fails to recognize in that moment is that the person posting that screenshot is playing a completely different sport than you are.
Completely different. A momentum day trader is playing a game of short-term psychological arbitrage. Their goal is to capture a 2% price movement over the next 60 minutes.
They don't care about the underlying value of the company. They care about the momentum of the crowd.
But if you are a 35-year-old trying to secure a comfortable retirement, your time horizon isn't 60 minutes, it's 30 years. You are playing a game of long-term economic compounding.
Exactly. And the mechanics of those two games require entirely different behaviors.
Right. If you, the 30-year investor, start abandoning your strategy to mimic the 60-minute day trader, it is exactly like a marathon runner looking at a football player thinking they look successful and deciding to run a 26-mile race wearing heavy shoulder pads and spiked cleats.
The equipment is perfectly rational for the football player's game, but it will physically destroy the marathon runner.
The danger is that on the surface, the actions look identical. Both the day trader and the long-term investor are clicking a button that says, buy stock.
But the mechanical intent behind the click is worlds apart. So the defense mechanism here is to literally define your game, write it down.
Yes, I am a passive long-term investor seeking average market returns over 3 decades to fund my autonomy.
Once you articulate your specific game, the noise of the day traders, the crypto speculators, and the flashy neighbors suddenly loses its power over you.
It makes their actions irrelevant to your life. And this seamlessly brings us to the final unifying piece of advice in the source material, a phrase that summarizes everything we've explored today.
What is it?
Respect the mess.
Respect the mess.
It is an acknowledgement that personal finance is not physics. In physics, if you drop an apple, gravity dictates it falls at a specific, universally agreed upon rate of acceleration. There is one right answer.
But in finance, two incredibly smart, highly informed, completely rational people can look at the exact same economic data and make vastly different decisions.
And they disagree not because one of them is foolish, but because their underlying lives are different.
They have different risk tolerances shaped by different traumas. They have different family structures, different health concerns, and different emotional needs.
There is no singular, universal mathematical formula that solves the human condition.
Respecting the mess means accepting the gray areas. It means letting go of the desperate, anxious search for the perfect portfolio and instead embracing the messy, imprecise reality of finding the portfolio that simply works for you.
Just like the medical shift we discussed at the very beginning, moving away from a paternalistic universal cure and moving toward a nuanced understanding of the individual patient.
What an incredible framework. Let's trace the arc of the psychological landscape we've just mapped out today.
Let's do it.
We started in a 1930s dentist chair with Clarence Hughes, realizing the terrifying danger of experts who apply universal solutions without understanding individual pain.
We moved inward, learning that true wealth isn't the Ferrari you buy to impress strangers. It's the invisible, unspent capital that you preserve by keeping your ego in check.
We redefined the very concept of a return, shifting our metric from mathematical optimization to the biological necessity of sleeping at night. And we explored how extending our time horizon lets compounding do the heavy lifting.
We saw that the ultimate dividend of wealth isn't luxury, but total control over your own time.
We reframed the psychological agony of market crashes as inevitable fees with a roller coaster ride, rather than fines punishing us for our choices.
We engineered 50-ton bridges by worshiping room for error to protect us from ruinous risk.
We learned to buy the invisible armor of autonomy by saving for the unknown. We fought the end of history illusion by avoiding extremes, and we learned to define our own game so we aren't distracted by players on a different field.
And ultimately, we learned to respect the messy, highly personalized, chaotic reality of human finance.
To you, listening right now, the ultimate takeaway of this deep dive is profound permission. You have permission to be human.
You are the architect of your own financial life.
You do not have to play by the rules of the day trader on Twitter, the flashy neighbor down the street, or even the rigidly mathematical financial advisor sliding a binder across a desk.
You get to build a system that honors your unique psychology, your fears, and your goals.
You are allowed to prioritize your peace of mind over a spreadsheet's definition of maximum efficiency.
You are allowed to navigate your own muddy waters.
But before we go, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought. Something to chew on that builds on the foundation we've just laid.
What's that?
The text makes a deeply compelling argument that using money to gain total, absolute control over your time is the highest dividend in finance. The ultimate dream is waking up on a Tuesday and saying, I have no obligations, no boss, and I can do whatever I want today.
Complete and utter autonomy, the holy grail.
Right. But let's think about the mechanics of human psychology for a second. What happens when you actually cross that finish line?
Oh, I see where you're going.
Once you achieve absolute freedom, no forced schedule, no external demands, no structured purpose dictated by a company, what if that sudden massive void of structure becomes its own psychological crisis?
It's a huge shift.
We spend our entire working lives fighting against the heavy constraints of obligation. But those constraints, annoying as they are, also force us to interact with the world. They give us an identity. They give us a reason to put on shoes and leave the house.
It is the ultimate paradox. The struggle provides the meaning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the question is, are we spending decades mathematically and financially preparing for a level of absolute unstructured freedom that our brains are not actually biologically equipped to handle?
Wow.
It's like staring at an X-ray, agonizing over how to heal the broken bone, only to realize that once the cast comes off, the real challenge is figuring out where you are actually trying to walk.
A beautiful, terrifying problem to have.
Indeed. Until next time, keep exploring the muddy waters.